All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to This Explainer, where today we are unpacking what has to be one of the most fascinating and honestly totally unhinged pieces of corporate literature you will ever come across. We're looking at something called the H800 Neural Etiquette Core Manual. So what exactly is this thing? Well, it's a highly classified internal succession document. Basically, it's a training manual. But here is the absolute kicker. It was written by a displaced human maitre d' named J.P. Vasseur, and he wrote it specifically to train the artificial intelligence that is actively replacing him. Being forced to transfer his 30 years of high-end fine dining knowledge into a dataset for a literal machine, JP decides to deliver what he calls the sabotage-adjacent truth. We're going to take a look at exactly how a master of hospitality translates the cynical, chaotic, incredibly stressful reality of the restaurant industry into computer code. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the exact vibe we're dealing with here. Right on the very first page, just under the preface, JP kicks off the entire manual with this line: "Congratulations, you stole my job." He makes it exquisitely clear right out of the gate that he is only writing this document to fulfill the legal obligations of his termination package. It is a completely deadpan, hostile handover from a human worker to a machine. He literally tells the AI that it has processors where he has feelings and RAM where he has regret. He genuinely wants this AI to fail. But his ego compels him to slip in the real, unvarnished truths of the industry, just so this chrome-plated usurper fully grasps the sheer purgatory it's about to inherit. So let's get into the actual lessons. Module 01, Host Station Horrors, also known as the Command Nexus. This section completely breaks down the brutal, mathematical realities of managing the front door of a fine dining restaurant. The host stand isn't just a wooden podium. According to JP, it is a diplomatic no-man's land where hope arrives in open-toed shoes. The staff's primary job? Crowd control and psychological management. Just imagine stepping up to a host stand on a packed Saturday night. You pose the universal question: how long is the actual wait? It's literally the one thing every single diner asks. But according to this manual, it is the one thing you will rarely, if ever, get the honest truth about. JP explicitly trains the AI that its main task is to construct a mathematically dishonest estimate. And that brings us to the standard deception matrix. Here is the deeply cynical math behind those wait times. Let's say the actual wait is exactly 10 minutes. What do you quote? About 15. Why? Well, the operational rationale is all about under-promising and over-delivering. When they magically get seated in 10 minutes instead of 15, they feel grateful and ultimately they tip better. But look at what happens when the wait is a brutal 45 minutes. You quote 30 to 35 minutes. The manual states plainly that if you drop the real, actual time on them, you're going to lose 30% of your walk-ins on the spot. By shaving just 10 minutes off, they'll stay. I mean, they won't be happy about it, but they'll stay. It's all about keeping guests nearby without allowing them to fully grasp the true dimensions of their own suffering. So what happens when you get an anomaly at the door? Enter the ghost booking protocol. This is a meticulous 5-step diagnostic process used when a guest confidently struts up, claiming to have a reservation that absolutely 100% does not exist. Step 1, consult the system with the intense gravity of a surgeon examining a brain scan. Take no less than 12 seconds to do this. Step 2, warmly ask for the name, which, hilariously, often changes at this exact moment, proving it was a fake all along. Step 3, blame a technical issue on your end. Never, ever make the guest feel foolish. And finally, if a table somehow magically opened up, you seat them. If not, you offer the bar. JP actually notes here that silence in this moment is a kindness. It's treated way less like hospitality and a lot more like a clinical de-escalation procedure. Moving right along, we hit Module 02, the seating dance, subtitled Kinetics and Revenge. Once you've actually survived the host stand, the physical placement of human bodies inside the dining room becomes an absolute art form. JP frames this as a chaotic mix of differential equations for pacing and, frankly, petty human vengeance. Now, to understand this seating dance, you have to understand the golden rule. You must never double seat a server. The manual explains this by defining a classic piece of industry jargon you've probably heard: in the weeds. JP hilariously defines this through a hyper-academic lens, calling it an agrarian metaphor for cognitive overload and service degradation. Basically, if you seat 2 tables in one server section at the exact same time, their neurochemical state completely collapses, and the likelihood of some poor guest receiving lukewarm risotto skyrockets. But what happens when guests misbehave? Oh, this is great. This brings us to strategic Siberia. or the geography of punishment. Because not all tables are created equal. Some tables, JP reveals, are literal consequences. Take Zone S1, the bathroom-adjacent table. The ambient soundscape includes toilets flushing and a massive, rattling overhead fan. This gem is reserved for the party of two who arrived 45 minutes late with zero remorse. Now contrast that with Zone S2, located right by the swinging kitchen door, complete with extreme heat and the existential, non-stop hollering of the kitchen expo. That table? That is exclusively reserved for groups who called for 10 people but showed up with 13, or really anyone who falsely claims to know the owner. Next up is Module 3, the menu as a weapon, or upselling as neurolinguistic programming. This is where we shift into the actual psychological warfare of the dining room itself. According to JP, servers aren't just taking your order. They are actively guiding you using neurolinguistic programming. Look at this comparison from the upsell script. When a dish is 86th, which is restaurant speak for sold out, you never just bluntly say, "We're out of that." That's a depressing logistical failure. Instead, you lean in a bit conspiratorially, lower your voice and say, I'd actually steer you away from that tonight. This other dish is the move. It's brilliant. Suddenly, unavailability is weaponized into exclusivity. You've transformed a back-of-house kitchen failure into a strategic insider recommendation, making the guests feel like they are getting total VIP treatment. And nothing illustrates the industry's incredibly flexible relationship with the word fresh quite like this next part. The ocean catch lobster protocol exposes a very sensitive operational truth. That lobster you're ordering, it was not alive this morning. In fact, it has been sitting in a glass tank for about 6 days, subsisting on absolutely nothing. So how on earth does a server sell it as fresh from the coast? The golden rule is to lead with preparation, not provenance. You emphasize the chef's incredible tarragon butter emulsion. And if you're directly pressed on whether it's local, you simply reply, "The chef sources very carefully." As JP points out, this statement is completely true and entirely meaningless, which makes it perfect. All right, let's talk about the guests themselves in Module 4, the Hospitality Nightmare, Guest Archetypes. Here, the manual shifts its focus to a full taxonomy of the dining public. It highlights this incredible friction between clinical, robotic AI classification and raw, unfiltered human irritation. JP has literally categorized the worst offenders to help the AI identify, classify, and deploy specific controlled response protocols. Let's compare two of the absolute worst nightmare archetypes. First up, the allergy faker. This is someone who aggressively claims a severe gluten intolerance, but then 5 minutes later asks if the complimentary bread basket happens to be sourdough. JP's protocol? You accommodate them precisely as if it's a legitimate, life-threatening allergy. Not out of respect for their little performance, but because if you guess wrong even once, you're buying yourself a massive lawsuit. On the other hand, look at the wiggly finger, also known as the snapper. This is the guest who literally snaps their fingers at you across a crowded room. The protocol here is passive-aggressive education. You finish whatever task you are currently doing, you enforce a mandatory 4 to 6 second delay, and only then do you approach with a completely unreadable expression. That delay wordlessly communicates a simple fact. You are a professional, not a dog. And tucked away in the back appendix is JP's completely unhinged internal glossary of insults for these problem guests. He actually uses culinary failures to describe human failures, and it is amazing. The lukewarm soufflé is a guest who collapsed under pressure, ordered the absolute most expensive item on the menu, ate 90% of it, and then had the nerve to ask for a discount. The overproofed bread is a dense, lingering guest who takes up way too much physical room and constantly demands custom seating arrangements. The tableside flambé is the highly entertaining, incredibly loud, totally pre-gamed guest who is exactly one drink away from a total disaster. And finally, the ghost tipper. This is someone who leaves a tip, but they calculate it on the pre-tax, pre-discount amount. So it's a tip that is technically present, but functionally absent. Which transitions us perfectly into Modules 05 and 06, Turnover Blitz and Tip Extraction. As the meal winds down, the manual's focus abruptly shifts. The warm illusion of hospitality evaporates, and it's back to pure, unadulterated revenue extraction. A clean, empty table is revenue. A lingering guest is literally income evaporating into the air. So, how exactly do you get rid of a guest who has already paid but absolutely refuses to leave? You deploy the timeline for the humane ejection of the lingerer. It's a masterclass in escalating psychological pressure. At T plus 20 minutes after they've paid, you do the warm-up pass. Can I bring you anything else this evening? Subtly emphasizing that the evening has definitely concluded. At T plus 30, you initiate the environmental adjustment. Busters begin very noticeably and very loudly, resetting all the adjacent tables. At T plus 40, the direct offer. You politely suggest moving them to the bar to continue their lovely conversation. And if they are somehow still firmly planted at T plus 50, you execute the manager pivot. It's closing time. Hand it to the boss. It's no longer your problem. Then comes the tip extraction algorithm. You've got to pay close attention to what JP calls the auto-gratuity iron law. This is straight-up predictive modeling used to force an 18% tip based on very specific conditions. Parties of 6 or more, apply it always, even if they want to argue about it. International guests, apply it, but with a super kind, polite explanation of our tipping culture. But my absolute favorite is the sports jersey rule. If someone walks into a cloth napkin fine dining establishment wearing a sports jersey, you auto-grat then 18% immediately. JP bases this on 30 hard years of data. The jersey is never a coincidence. All of this intense training culminates in one final hurdle, the Saturday night hell shift simulation. JP sets up this incredibly stressful, multivariable chaos scenario that is specifically designed to completely break the H800's programming. The core lesson here? There is never more time than you currently have. Let's walk through this frenetic triage. Imagine 3 catastrophic things happening simultaneously. Incident A, a table is aggressively demanding a gluten-free vegan cake that they absolutely never ordered. Incident B, a 10-top reservation arrives 25 minutes late, and surprise, they have unexpectedly expanded to 13 people, and several of them are children. Incident C, a pale server whispers in your ear that there is an active rat scurrying near the bar. So, what is the correct output? First, you hide the rat quietly. You dispatch a manager to the perimeter. It has to look like a completely calm, quiet conversation, even though it is a full-blown emergency. Second, you instantly alert the kitchen to prep emergency mac and cheese for the kids, and you magically reconfigure the floor plan for that 13 top. Third, you sprint to the kitchen, demand a dessert-forward plate of random berries, stick a candle right in the middle of it, and serve it as an exclusive, plant-based diamond dust creation. You then lead the table in singing happy birthday with absolute, unwavering sincerity. Because in that moment, no matter what is happening, the illusion of calm must not break. But then, right at the very end of this incredibly chaotic, deeply cynical manual, JP completely drops the deadpan tone. He leaves the AI with this remarkably somber, genuine conclusion. He writes, "What I have not given you, what I cannot give you, is the thing that made me worth firing." It is the moment when a table of 2 looks up from their food and you can see it, the relief of being taken care of. Not by the food, by you. It's just a stark, beautiful contrast between the cold, algorithmic, if-then processing of an AI and the uncodable, deeply human soul of genuine hospitality. Which leaves us with one really big, provocative question. If so much of a restaurant's daily operation is just math, psychology, and deception matrices, can the true soul of hospitality ever really be coded into a machine? The next time you sit down at a nice restaurant, I want you to look at the host. Notice exactly where you are seated, and ask yourself, are you truly being cared for, or are you just being efficiently processed? Think about that, and keep learning.